Orca Slicer, custom printer, printer not listed, can't enter G-code, don't know how to start, don't know where to end, don't know where to put the information in. Printer's not calibrating, it's not loading, it won't print, has an error, but you want to use Orca Slicer. You've got a routed printer, or you don't have a routed printer. You've got a printer that's compatible. Well, either way, I've got you covered. Check it out, we'll get this done in a heartbeat. Let's use Orca Slicer for any custom printer you want. Alright guys, welcome. Chris here, and this is part 1 of a part 5 series. It's an introduction for beginners, hobbyists and enthusiasts, and maybe some people who might pick up some tips along the way, even if you're a bit of a pro. I'm not going to say I'm a pro, I'm still learning. I've been 3D printing for 5 years, but you know what? When you learn one thing, you can still learn another. That's my motto. So today, we're going to walk you through the Orca Slicer settings and how to add a custom printer with the G-code start and end code. That might sound simple enough, but some people find it very difficult. You might have a router printer, you might have a custom printer that doesn't have a preset profile. So today I'm going to walk you through it. So let's jump into it. I'm going to use Orca Slicer. Now I have the Orca Slicer, the latest version that's just rolled out with the scarf support and a few other added features. If you don't have that, that's fine. So I think I'm running the 2.0 version. Now to get things started, as you can see in the top here, we've got a list of different Creality printers. Doesn't have to be a Creality printer. It can be Anycubic. It can be, a Voron. It can be an elegoo. It can be a number of different printers. It doesn't have to be that. So what we're going to do to start off with is we're going to walk you through how to add G-codes. Now every slicer profile has different G-code entries for start and stop. Now, not only do the printers have different configurations based on whether they're a Core XY printer or whether they're a bed slinger printer, but they also have certain coding for the G-code that's exclusive to the slicer. Now, I'll show you this by, as you can see on the right-hand side, we have Orca Slicer. Now, what I'll do now is I'll bring up Creality Print. Now, with Creality Print, you can see, if you look at the top section here, you'll see I've got listed as a printer there that I've preloaded. It's a CR10 SE with a 0.4 nozzle. To the right, in Orca Slicer, there's a CR10 SE with a 0.4 nozzle as well. Now, the first thing I'm going to show you is the most important thing when trying to add a printer. And then after that, I'll show you how to add the printer. So what we're going to do to start off with is, before you jump to finding your printer and wanting to look for it and adding it to the slicer, what I want to do is I want to show you something that's really exclusive to each individual slicer. Now, Creality Slicer has this. All slicers have it, but what I'm trying to show you is this right here. So if we go to any printer and we click Manage Printer on Creality Print, now you can do this in Prusa Slicer, Bamboo Slicer, obviously Creality Print, Cura, and now Orca Slicer. And you will find that if you get your generic, if you look here, and you see the start print code for the CR10 SE, I've just highlighted in blue. We can scroll up and down. You've got your feed rates and your G-code coding numbers. So that's the easiest way to put it without being too technical. I'm not a G-coding expert. I won't say that I am. Far from it, in fact. But I do have macro access and I do have root access printers. So I get my head around it and know reasonably well what I'm doing. So basically what I want to show you today is the difference between why you can't just grab one print start G-code and end code and put it straight into another slicer. Because each slicer recognizes certain G-codes for certain printers differently based on the way it processes its own information on its software. Now, to show you what I mean by this, if you look at the G-code in the printer start of G-code here, you'll notice that if we scroll down after we've got G28 and home, that we have a section here, and I know this because I've seen this error quite often, with Creality Print and basically all Creality printers, you'll find that here that I highlight in blue, it says M109, Material Print Temperature Layer. And what that means is, layer 0, is that is the printing temperature for the layering of the print before it starts printing. Now for Creality, it doesn't need anything else. It's basically, its software is designed so that it will recognize that information and automatically know to detect the not only the nozzle temperature but the bed temperature. Now, why is this important? Well, it's one of the conflicting issues as to why people can't add their own printers if there's not a preset profile in the slicer they would like to use. So, for instance, the Orca Slicer did not have the Creality CR10 SE. So, what you in fact have to do is you have to add the start G-code and the end G-code from your factory, I would say factory, but your generic slicer that is mostly factory compatible with your printer. Being that the CR10 SE is with Creality, thus using Creality Print, I've got the Creality Print G-code. Now, getting back to the M109, if I was to copy that start G-code over into Orca Slicer will accept it, and that's no worries. But when you load your file, you configure your profile settings, you set your layer heights, all the other settings that we'll go into later on in the next parts of the video series, you'll go to click print and it'll home Z, set the bed, and then what it'll do is calibrations if you select it to do so. As soon as it goes to start print, it'll come with an error. And it'll usually be something along the lines of error, 4-digit code, bed heating element, calibration, or something along those lines. Why is that happening? Well, simply put, because Orca needs more specific information and so does Cura. Now, why is that? Well, whether we like to believe it or not, Creality Print is more of a basic printing slicer. Now, I've used Creality Print for quite some time, and it is what it is. It has the fundamentals profiles, and it can print relatively decent prints. But if you want to really get the most out of your printers, you really need to use slicers like Prusa. Obviously, Bamboo has their own Bamboo Studio. Orca Slicer and Cura Slicer are predominantly made for custom printers and custom profile printing. Why? Because they have a lot of community plugins. They have a lot of experienced and professional features that the other slicers just simply don't have. So, before I dribble on too much, let's dive into it and I'll show you exactly what I'm talking about. So if we highlight the M109 print temperature layer there and we go into the click to edit preset of the CR10 SE on the Orca Slicer, it'll bring us up to this window here. Now this window here, I'll just open it up for you, is going to show me the basic information of the printable areas, the height, the Z offset, what G-code it's using, whether it's Marlin, Clipper, repeater, all these different ones. The most important thing to start off with today is we're just going to be looking at the G-code. So the G-code here, you can see for the machine start code, when I entered it in, I copied and pasted this and straight into here. Now, Creality Print doesn't let you copy, right click, nothing happens. So the easiest way to do that is to basically hit Control C and then come across to this point under here, left click and hit Control V. I won't do that just yet because this G-code's been modified in Orca Slicer. Now what's been modified? Nothing really that major. The difference is right here. As you can see from the difference between when we looked at the Creality Slicer over here, M109 material print temperature layer 0. Whereas Orca Slicer has not only the M109, but also the M190. What's the difference? The difference is Orca recognizes that in the G-code, it wants to not only wait for the temperature to stabilize within the nozzle and the bed, but it also allows you to configure different types of bed sheets in the printer profile. We won't go into that today, but this is very important because without this G-code, the way it's written right there, for any Creality printer, it will not work in Orca Slicer. Now, if you go to a preset profile in Orca Slicer or Cura, you will find that this will be worded basically 99% exactly like that. Unless, of course, you've wanted to put specific nozzle temperatures in and bed temperatures in that you want it to actually start off with as soon as the print is engaged, which obviously I don't. So therefore, in order to copy this across, what you then do is this. Click out of here. All right, one of the other things I want to mention with the G-code before I go into these settings and we start entering a custom profile printer is just quickly wanted to touch base. I'd missed a point to mention is with this M109 material print temperature layer 0, one of the things you need to check, it doesn't always have to have the M190 in there, as other printers don't have them. And also you'll find to cross-reference the G-code to make sure it matches your slicer with any parameters that slicer needs to recognize certain temperatures between the nozzle, the bed clearances, and the nozzle temperature before starting a print and during as well, is also check within your manufacturer slicer. So simply open up whether it's Prusa, you've got a Prusa printer, you've got an elegoo printer, Anycubic, or even the profiles that have automatically been included in, say, Cura, for instance. Because Cura uses the same G coding requirements for their start and end code profile for as Orca does, it's another way of saying so that if you find that under the, as we'll go through in a minute, if you find that one of the settings or your printer isn't in Orca Slicer and you can't find it manually, before you add it custom, you might find it easier that if you open Cura up or install it and open it up, you might find that there was a profile in there, as I did with my Creality CR10 Smart Pro. They had a profile in, I think it was Prusa. So what I did is I got the G-code from there and I actually copied it and manually entered it into Cura, and therefore I was able to create a printer with Cura. So that's another way of doing it as well. And as you'll see, I'll just quickly go into this again. When we go into the G-code here, you'll see at the very top, the difference is, one again, M109 material print temperature layer 0, and as it says in Orca, it says nozzle temperature initial layer, wait for nozzle temperature to stabilize. So basically what it's saying is Orca's wanting to know that the actual nozzle temperature has not only heated up, but has actually stabilized to the right temperature, because sometimes you can go above, and that's to make sure that when it starts the print, it's at the exact correct temperature. So that's another requirement that Orca requires. Cura doesn't require the M190, I do believe, but I'll double check that in a second. And also to do that. So basically what you do is you just leave the 109 in there and just delete that and then replace it with the bed temperature initial layer, single layer, so on. One of the other things too to double check is you can also go into it now with, say, for instance, Prusa Slicer. You'll find that the Core XY printers, a lot of them, they don't have or don't need the extensive requirements that, say, bed slingers do, because bed slingers have to coordinate the movement of the bed as well as the actual x-axis, whereas Core XY printers don't, because the bed's not moving on a y-axis plane. It's simply moving on a z-axis plane. So it doesn't need as many coordinates. So you'll find with the Core XY printer, the G-code is quite simple. And most of the profiling is in the setup of the actual printer's dimensions, which is in the actual information of the motion ability extruder settings and basic information of the print settings set up after you add it to the slicer. So that's a very important thing. If you need to replay that, do so, just to remind yourself of that. So I'll just quickly, before I go to this, I just wanted to show you another thing. So to cross-reference, for instance, as I said before with Cura Slicer, we'll do the same thing again. We'll open that up. I'm going to grab another printer, and I'm simply going to show you that it's the same. So we'll go to the Ender 3KE, and we'll go to Manage Printers, like so. And machine settings is what you want to click on, and then we'll scroll down on the start G-code, and you'll notice straight away there. So we get, again, well, we've got the M190 and the M109, both saying nozzle temperature initial layer weight, the same as here as well as in Orca Slicer. So once again, Cura as requiring and initiating the same coding and wording to make sure that the nozzle temperature and bed temperature are both not only at temperature but have equalized and stabilized. So that's something to consider as well. So like I said, if you go before we're going to add the custom printer, sometimes it's just as easy to be able to just check Prusa Slicer or Bamboo Studio or Simplify 3D, whatever it is. I don't use that one. Cura on, and then you can basically just copy it without actually having to enter it manually. If you do have to enter it manually, just remember those details. And you can also basically just choose another printer and check the G-code for that file as well. So that's a consideration to take into play to make things a little bit easier, because it can be complex sometimes. All right, moving on. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to simply create one from scratch just to run you through it. So what we'll do is I'm actually going to delete one of my profiles just to show you how simple it is. So what I'm going to do, just click out of this. I'm going to delete the, where are we? I have the SE. Actually, I've got a copy of the KE, so let's get rid of that one. So what you do, I'll just click on that, and I'm just going to go into here and there, and it's going to say, are you sure you want to delete? Yes. And now it's gone. So that's now gone. I've only got the one there left, which is user. So now what I'll simply do is I'm going to go into the printer, and I'm going to add a custom printer. Now you can automatically search for the printer. Orca Slicer does update their profiles quite often, but obviously they don't include all the other printers from the yesteryears. Obviously a lot of printers from say 2022, 2021 back that aren't as popular in the mainstream. As you can see, a lot of the Bamboo ones are there, including the A1, the minis. Most of the Creality printers are there, but not so much. So obviously we're not doing that today. We're looking for a custom printer. So we'll just simply go into here. You can add Clipper as well if you want, if you've got a Sonic Pad or you're running a Raspberry Pi. We're not going to do that today. So we just click Custom Printer and confirm. Oh, no, that's not the right one. Hang on a sec. Custom Printer. Where are we? My bad. What have I done? I've lost it. Oh, there we go. Sorry, my bad. Bit of a malfunction, bit of a brain warp. All right, so we've got a printer here. We want to go into the drop-down box. We want to create a printer. So instead of selecting select remove printers from the system presets, which is what we were just in before, go to custom printer. And from here, what we want to do is you can try and find your printer manually. So if you wanted to enter it, you can enter Creality or whatever list of printer you've got there. Now, for our sake, we're not going to do that, just so we can show you the custom way of doing it. So what we'll do is we'll go can't find printer model. And then what we're going to do is we're going to enter the manufacturer's name of the model, which is simply Creality. So we'll just type that in. So there's that Creality. And then what we're going to do, oh, I missed an L. There we go. And then we're going to input the model. So for us, it's the Ender 3-SE. Quite simply, easy. From there, you just select the nozzle type you've got with your 0.4, 0.6, whichever one you've got, 0.3, 0.5, whatever you've got. And then you want to look at the dimensions. So it's asking you for the printable space, which is the bed volume. So that's the X and Y, which is the base dimensions. So for us, it's 220 by 220. And once again, I'll just get rid of this real quickly so we can bring this up. So if you want to go into comparison, you can simply bring it up from there like so. And we can see, oh, I'll just click out of that. And we can go to enter the SE there, click manage, and we can see our basic parameters right there. So if you're not sure and you just want to copy it straight across without looking at your printer build volume profiles, you can do that as well. It's another cheap way of doing it. So anyway, go back to it, 220 by 220, and then our build height volume is 250. So punch that in. We don't need to worry about our hotbed STL and SVG at this point in time. It's not an issue. The origin for X and Y is generally going to be 0 because we want the offset and the center of the homing system to be in the center of the bed. If you don't want that, you can add a coordinate to that, but most people will just leave it at the center of the bed for the build volume. From there, we just click OK, and then you don't want to select this one here. What you want to do is you want to create, sorry, you don't want to click create based on current printer. You want to create from a template. So simply from there, you click custom, not Creality. So click custom or elegoo or whatever, click custom, and then drop down box, you want to enter from, where are we? We want to deselect Creality. And this is where you'll find the profiles for all the Creality printers that may or may not be already in the Orca Slicer system. Sorry, I went to the wrong tab just back there. So when you click that, you can custom, but it'll automatically bring up a custom profile for you, which we don't want. So what you want to do is just click Creality and then scroll down until you find the Ender 3 V3 SE. Boom, there it is. And then what we want to do is we want to create, you can create it from based on a current printer, which we don't have one in there, or you can if you want to. Sorry, my mistake. If you have a profile, just quickly touch on this is important. If you have another printer that is a similar printer, say for instance, it has the same build volume, and it's the same brand. Doesn't necessarily need to be the same board or CPU chipset or anything like that. As long as it's the same build volume and you're running the same nozzle that we entered in prior, and it's the same build volume, obviously, as I said, you can simply hit that and that will allow you to modify the G-code for, say, if you put in a KE model instead of an SE model, and then you can simply just adjust the acceleration settings and then obviously edit the name, and then you've basically got an easy way of doing it as well. So that's another option, but we'll just do it manually. We'll keep going with it manually. We want to select all, which is easy, and the process preset template, we'll select all as well. So that's going to give us access to all the filaments. Now you can customize that, but it's easy. I just prefer just click all, and then we want to just go create. And then from there, our print is now created. Now, that's pretty much how to do the G-code. Now, the next thing we want to do is we want to go through and make sure all these settings are entered in correctly, and then we want to put in our acceleration settings. So now we want to go to the printer settings, and we want to set the printable area manually so that you can double check it. It's 220 by 220, perfect. Now, if you do have a profile, which you can actually download for set sheets of texture, whether it's PIE, smooth, textured, different types of material beds, you can enter that in there as well as the model if known. We're not going to worry about that today. And obviously if you don't have a rectangular bed, or you've got a Delta printer and it's a circular bed, or if you've got a custom printer and it's a rat rig or a Voron for some reason, then you can do that as well, but we're not going to do that today. Just click OK. And then from there you can click an excluded bed volume if you want, or an excluded bed area. So if you want to basically bring the edges of the print area in so it doesn't overlap to the edge of the bed, you can do that as well. And then you got your print height. You can click select multiple bed types, and what that's going to do is it's going to put in a pre-built different settings for PO, PET, PI, and smooth bed sheets, and that's going to allow it to adjust the Z offset so that you get a more accurate Z offset, so you're not digging or dragging your print and you're not getting under extrusion and things like that. So you can do that as well. Then you've got your G-code, your thumbnails. You've got 96 and 303 by 300. I like to also enter 320 by 320. And why do I do that is because, especially on, say, the SE, I do actually have a Sonic pad, which I use with my CR10 Smart Pro. And that allows for a slightly bigger icon of the picture of what I'm trying to print, and you can simply choose PNG or JPEG. So it depends on the screen and system you're running. We'll leave that as PNG. Time cost, don't have to bother with that. If you do have a Sonic pad, you can choose to use firmware retraction by running through your clipper, but we'll just let Orca do that. Then you've got fan speed up times, don't need to worry about that. Everything else you pretty much leave as standard. As you can see, the clearance radius is all there. The bed mesh, leave that normal. And then you've got your nozzle type. I tend to just basically hit hardened steel, because that way if I swap the nozzles in and out, all that does is allow for a higher tolerance within the settings for temperature adjustment. So if you put in a brass nozzle, it'll cap it, so it won't allow you to go above 250 degrees Celsius. So it's just as easy to put it in. If you do have an auxiliary part cooling fan that you've got set up to the printer, say for instance you've got a Sovol or an Anycubic or an elegoo printer that's got an X-rail accessory blower fan that blows onto from the rear to the bed onto the part cooling, you can add that as well by ticking that box. From there, we already know the machine G-code, so that's already put in there. Excuse me. You can put in layer G-codes. We're not going to worry about it today. We know our G-code's pretty good, but the last we want to check is make sure that the M190 is set right, which it actually is. So that's the key thing. We want to make sure that that's set right. Now, if that wasn't set right, then we want to go back into it and we want to make sure that the G code that we have here, the M109, is not saying material print temperature layer 0, because if it is, we need to change to this one here, which is M190, wait for bed to temp to stabilize, and M109, which is wait for temp to stabilize as well. So that's really important. Otherwise, you're going to get an error and it won't print. So that's the only main thing you want to do there. You can edit these G codes. Obviously, with the NG code, you can disable steppers. You can have them so they're running, so you manually stop them. You can have it so that the bed doesn't turn off if you're going to do another print straight away. But for now, we're just going to leave that standard. All right, so the next one you got is multiple material. Obviously, with an Ender 3 SE, we're not going to be printing multiple material because we don't have an AMS, so we'll leave that. And then you've got the extruder, so you can manually change the nozzle. You've got your layer heights, which is perfectly fine, 0.8, 0.36. If you've got an offset you want to apply, which we don't have to worry about that. And then you've got your standard settings. So I'm not going to go into that today. That's for another video in part 2, which I'll be live streaming after this in 2 days' time. And we'll go through all those settings and we'll sort that out. The next most important one we want to fix up today is motionability. So for us, luckily enough, Orca Slicer recognized the SE because it has a profile. But if it didn't have a profile preset in Orca Slicer and you added your printer manually, all these acceleration points would be set at the standard volume, which is generally either 1500 or 500 for your acceleration on your X, Y, and Z, or XY, sorry, and your E. And then obviously your max speeds would be to be changed as well. So you just need to make sure you correlate with that. For us, we've got the speed limitations. We can go in and we can go to move ability. And we can simply see that the maximum X speed, once again, if you don't have a Creality and you're using the Anycubic, elegoo, Prusa, you can simply load your Prusa, like for instance here, you can load your Prusa and you can put in your machine limits as they are there, and you can simply just copy them and put them in manually. That's pretty straightforward. As you can see, we just want to make sure that all these are the same so that we're getting the correct speeds, and then obviously default jerk and so on. Sometimes Orca Slicer will have or recognize the printer, even if it doesn't have a profile, and it'll apply what it thinks is a better jerk or a slightly different acceleration. Mostly just the jerk settings can be slightly different, but that can be done and calibrated through calibration tests. So as we can see from there, because SE had that, we didn't have to worry about it. Now you will find in Cura is a little bit different, that when you go into Cura, you do have to enter these manually. So when you go into Cura, for instance, we'll go into our speed settings, and you'll see when we scroll down here, we've got all these settings here set at 5,000, and that's for the KE. Now, if we go to the SE, switch that around, you can see that they're all 2,500 and so on. Whereas whereas some of these ones are at 5,000. So there's a bit of a variance there, which you need to play around with. Obviously these are inner and outer wall accelerations, so that'll be in the print settings. That's different to the actual motion ability itself. That's to do with the printing acceleration, so don't get confused between the two. But if that is saying 500 or 1,000, then once again you need to enter that in as well. But I'll leave Cura for another day because that's a different beast altogether. So moving forward from that, that's pretty much basically it. The other things you can look at is your filament setups, which we'll go into as another part of the video. And you can just go back and just check everything, make sure everything's right. You do have your extrusion options. Now, with your extrusion options, you can enter that if you like, as you can see by clicking on extruder there. Now, the extrusion options for Orca Slicer won't be in the printer setup, as you can see for Creality. Other slicers are different. That with Orca Slicer, these settings here for your nozzle line width, outer wall line width, infill line width, your start layer width, and so on. Not the height, but the actual nozzle width that it lays down on the bed. That will actually be in the actual quality settings of, just close this down, quality settings of the actual slicer settings itself in Orca, as you can see right there. So if we did want to change that, as you can see, the Creality's settings are different. So that's their stock recommended settings. So you can simply go along and, for instance, say support line width, it says 0.42, So we want to go with support line width 4.2. It's really that simple. Obviously, once you put these line widths in, so you've got your outer wall line width, for instance, is 2. Inner wall line width, what we've got is 4.5. Our top and line, top surface, what have we got? Initial first layer, they've got it written down as 4.6 for a slightly wider line, which gives you better bed adhesion. Then you've got your default, which is set to 0.4, which is up the top there. Your top surface, which is generally in Creality is regarded as your top and bottom line surface, is regarded as 0.42. And then you've got your infill line as well, which is 0.45, and solid infill as well. Now, for me personally, you can simply save these settings, which is perfectly fine. But in another video, I will show you how to set these parameters up for your line width for different models so that you can get less layer lines throughout your print, and you don't get as much layering through the curves and bridging throughout your prints, which will affect the surface quality of your print as well also. And obviously by adjusting the internal infill line width, that can affect the speed of your infill as well, which helps with print times. So that's for another video. So from there, the last thing we need to do is we just want to hit save. Now from that, you can go into it, as it says process template, we just want to enter that. And whatever your line width is, generally you'll put that as what the actual profile is. So for us, this one is a standard profile, which is 0.2 millimeters, and we can just put that as standard. And now we have our first 0.2 standard profile for the Creality Ender 3 SC on a 0.4 nozzle. We can save this as an inside project, but for us, we want to keep it as our own user preset. So click OK. And now, as you can see under the top here, we now have, instead of process template, we have our 0.2. So that's pretty much how you add a printer to Orca Slicer. If I've missed anything, let me know in the comments below. I'm more than happy to do a follow-up video on this after I've done the part series as well. The next video I'll be putting up will be how to basically define your settings within your profile parameters for different prints, i.e. busts, characters, storage devices, the really important tricky ones, which are, technical models and bridging, and also supports, which is a big one for a lot of people, working out the differences between when is the best time to use tree supports, when is the best time to use tower supports, zigzag, what type of tree supports to use, hybrid, organic, short, thin, and so on. So leave that for part 2. That's coming up in 2 days' time. Hope you enjoyed the channel. Hope you enjoyed the content today. Like and subscribe to the video. I'm also launching a Patreon as well, which will be up in 2 days' time. So that'll include some exclusive information. I'm going to be posting on that. So with Patreon, I am looking at putting in a membership, which you get behind the scenes access content, personal experience and tech from myself. Also give exclusive print settings and updates on the knowledge as I evolve, so will my Patreon members, to improve their print quality and their success with their printing with various different slicers and various printers. I'll also do monthly print file drops of exclusive print files that are exclusive to myself, that I have access to through a multitude of different developers and designers worldwide. So they'll be free drops as part of the Patreon monthly subscription. And also we'll also be getting exclusive industry promotion discounts as well from various manufacturers that I'm affiliated with, from Creality, flsun, a new brand of filament I'll be launching in a week's time, which is very, very nice filament. They make some really high-end filament at some relatively great prices, and I've got a big discount coming from that. Printing carbon fiber, ASA, translucent PETG, carbon fiber PETG, and a host of other awesome prints. So that'll be all part of my Patreon as well. I also do Q&A live streams to answer any questions you need to help you with your prints, even upgrades or issues you've got with your printers as well as member shout outs, and also votes on what I should do next. So keep an eye out for the Patreon. I'll put the link in the description below. Check it out if you want. I hope you enjoyed the video today. Like and subscribe if you've got anything you want to discuss, anything you'd like in the future, comment below. Keep printing, keep building it up. Peace. I'm Chris. I'm out.